We got death threats. My investigators were mooned in Alaska when they went up to look at the situation on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. We made them clean up the administration of that and run it in a way which didn't jeopardize the environment. We saw to it that government contractors should give back about $1 billion a year in overcharges. We sent a fair number of people to jail. We cleaned out Food and Drug not once but twice. Sent a fair number of their people to jail for accepting gratuities and payoffs for things that they were doing. We rewrote major parts of the Food and Drug Law which were being badly administered and which had to be changed. We saved the consumers billions of dollars a year on overcharges for fuel and energy and misbehavior in government contracting.
We talked about '94 as being a period of change. Was there then, or were there other times when you thought seriously about wanting to do other things?
I've always found that there are things I can do that are important and useful. I found then that it was more fun to be in the majority than in the minority. And I found then that I had to do smaller things. I had a lot of fun doing good, but smaller things. I would seine minnows instead of catching whales. But I also stopped a lot of rascality on the part of the administration. I was one of those who stopped the privatization of Social Security. I'm very proud of that. And if you look what happened when to the stock market and people's 401ks, you'll understand how important that is. I saw to it that the securities industry remained properly regulated. I protected a law called Glass-Steagall, which said the banks couldn't speculate with depositors' money. Did a lot of other things. It structured the banks so that they couldn't do this. The banking industry made a major cause out of this, and I stopped them for 40 years from getting a repeal. Gingrich and a fellow by the name of Phil Gramm, senator from Texas, got the law repealed. I warned at the time it was going to create a crash.
Right.
And sure as God made green apples, why, that happened, as you'll recall, when the banking industry went broke and we had to go in and bail them out. We're still bailing them out because they had done outrageous things with their depositors' money. And that was a lesson that they learned during the Depression. That was why they passed Glass-Steagall. So I had fun doing my job. I've always enjoyed the job. My wife Deborah is a wonderful partner, and she likes the life that this gives us, although we have to work very, very hard. But I think Deborah's probably the only person in this district that could beat me in a primary, because she's one of the most popular people in the place.
Did you ever look at running for state office or other position?
I have, and I've always found that it wasn't something I wanted to do. There was a boomlet one time for me to run for the Senate. I turned it down. There was a boomlet for me to run for governor once, attorney general. They wanted me to run for the Supreme Court, and I said, in the state of Michigan. I said, good God, that's an awful job. Why would I want to do that? But I've always found that the Congress is a place that I know and understand, and I can make a contribution. And I've enjoyed it, and I intend to stay there.
You certainly are not a fan of term limits, then?
I think term limits are an abomination. All you got to do is look. I had a friend by the name of Frank Zarb who was a big Republican. We started out as terrible enemies. He was the Federal Energy Administration Agency head. And Frank one time made the observation that we're trying to make this government so that anybody who knows how to do something and make government work better is not permitted to do it. And Frank, who, as I said, is a great friend of mine, we hunt elk together and did it for 20 years, is one of the smartest, most decent men I ever knew.
You've known some fascinating people, and it would be fun to go through your take on who've been your kind of heroes as president in because you've served under.
No, never served under one.
Excuse me.
I served with.
Excuse me,
served
I
with
misspoke.
11.
11?
Rayburn used to be very fussy about that.
I can
we are
appreciate
equal and coordinate branches of government.
Yes.
And Lynn, you understand
I
this
should
from
know
your
that,
service.
and I should not talk that way.
Yeah. My two great heroes, Roosevelt and Truman.
Mm-hmm.
Roosevelt saved the country, saved it from the Depression, saved it from the communists, and quite honestly, led us through World War II. In addition to that, he laid out the plan that created 50 or 70 or however many years of peace we've had since that war ended. That's mostly his leadership, his and Churchill's. Truman came along, didn't know a darn thing about the presidency because the previous president, Roosevelt, had run the government as a very, very small closed corporation. He and probably 6 people ran the government. Truman came in and he didn't even know about the atom bomb. And he had to decide on what we were going to do to win the war. Because if you remember, Roosevelt died in April and Truman came in. And we had won the war first in Germany. And then in August we won it in Japan and the East because Truman had the courage to drop the atom bomb. I'm one of 500,000 infantrymen and military personnel who would have died in the invasion. That was the estimate of what they thought was going to die in that landing and in that campaign. I called the Army. I was scheduled to go on the first wave in Japan. I had my orders. Said I just graduated from infantry OCS. And I called the Army and I said, what was my life expectancy? And they said, Dingell, your life expectancy was about 10 seconds. That was what small unit leaders had. And the Purple Hearts that they got to give out during that particular part of the war are still being given out after Korea, after Iraq, and after all of the other military activities that we have done in the 70-some years since that war. So Truman came along and implemented what it was that Roosevelt had wanted to do, led the world into a period of real peace, laid the basis for defeating communism, saved Europe and Middle East from communism with the Marshall Plan, had the courage to address the communist expansion in Korea, and is going down in history now as one of the most respected presidents in history. And if you look, by the way, when somebody like Nixon comes along after him and gets in trouble, whose statue does he put in the Oval Office? Harry Truman.
The buck stops here, was it, right?
Now that gives you pretty good answers to how people regard him as a man of extraordinary courage. So those are two of my greatest heroes. I was a good friend of Clinton. I'm an admirer of Obama. I was a great fan of Jerry Ford, who was a very decent man. I didn't agree with him on everything, but we worked together to resolve a lot of hard problems. Personally, I was very fond of Jimmy Carter, who was a very fine human being, but not a very good president. George Bush, the first, number 41, and I were good friends. He used to play paddleball in the house gym. And George was a very decent guy. George W. Bush, number 43, and I are good personal friends, but I think he was a terrible president. Kennedy, really charming guy, very glossy, ran Camelot, and everybody thought what a wonderful thing it was. And he was a good president, not great. Didn't live long enough to let people know. Johnson was probably the third best that I've known. And Johnson remade the country. Johnson was an old New Dealer. He was a Texas populist, And he knew that the civil rights things that he was doing and the legislation we passed was going to turn the South Republican. It did. But he led us on health, he led us on Medicare, he led us on education, he led us on a wide array of things that changed and redid the country. Eisenhower was a corporate vice president, or was a corporate president and golfer and country gentleman. He had his farm up there in Gettysburg. Basically, he was a good president when he focused his mind on it.
You have been very generous in blocking out time for us to talk today. I've enjoyed it, appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. It's been good to see you. Yeah.
You bet.